Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we have the renewed top 30 meta snapshot for both PvE content and PvP content as I view them for update 4.8. Now, before we get into it, I have two kind of things to address. The first one is, of course, as always, when it comes to these kinds of lists, I know I have a lot of influence and a lot of sway with my words, but I need to warn you that these are just my kind of impressions and my interpretations of where I see characters being used the most and where I see characters being the most effective in different game modes. And the game modes that I weigh for this list are the following game modes. Even though I don't participate actively in Alliance Conquest, I do ask around a lot about it, and I do get a lot of players giving me updates about characters that are performing well in Alliance Conquest. But Alliance Conquest is probably my weakest area of knowledge. Shadowland is probably the easiest by far game mode here, so it's got the least representation, but otherwise I tried to mix it with my own experience and what I see other players doing. The second thing that I wanted to cover is the idea that, or the kind of, not quite an accusation, but a criticism, and a fair criticism, that I'm doing this snapshot very soon before a new update. And this snapshot may very well be outdated in just, 72 hours or 96 hours. And that's a very fair point, and I think you're right. I actually hope that the snapshot does get invalidated in some way, because I want my Wolverine back, damn it. But the reason why, there's a twofold reason why I want to make the snapshot now. The first reason is so that we have a concrete plan, or not quite a plan, but a concrete set of plans for how the game was just a few days before the update. So if there is a huge meta shift, we will be able to see it more clearly by comparing it to this snapshot. The last snapshot was so long ago that we've had new characters. We have had quite a bit of a shift in certain areas of the game, as you'll see from some of the bolded character names, and so I do want to illustrate that now in case it's, it rapidly disappears. If Juggernaut comes in and he completely erases Minerva's value, her spot on the list is going to drop significantly, even though this is her first time on the list. So I do want to have sort of a historical point of reference for these things. Secondly, we'll be able to more accurately gauge the new update and see how meta breaking and how meta shifting it is. I don't expect this list to be too wildly affected, but considering that Shadowland is getting a facelift of some sort, it may become the new best game mode to gauge a character's PvE worth, and then because of that, it may actually affect these rankings altogether. Like if Luna Snow just happens to suck in the new Shadowland, and you really want to do well in the new Shadowland, maybe you're going to have to think of some of these other characters. Maybe some of the characters that I haven't even listed with pizzas actually do want some pizza, because they're actually amazing at Shadowland, and we need them to be amazing at Shadowland to actually crush the game mode. So that's what I wanted, and those are the kind of incentives that I had for making this snapshot now, just a few days before the update. Now, getting into the actual lists, I want to start off with the PvE list. This is taking into consideration World Boss, Alliance Battle Extreme, not Alliance Battle, Giant Boss Raid, and to a very small extent Shadowland. Now, I heard some criticisms that certain players felt I was outweighing, or I was too heavily emphasizing the value of ABX for a character, and I wasn't quite taking as much consideration into the other two game modes. So I did try to more properly weight their value. I know a lot of people, for example, are super hot on Minerva right now. Oh man, she's the best, and she's great, and she's, the free-to-play champion. But I haven't seen a lot of gameplay of her in World Boss Ultimate that really, sparks my interest and impresses me. I've seen some, but nothing too wild. We already know her exploits in World Boss Ult, or in Alliance Battle Extreme, and then I think that she has pretty low value in GBR, considering the fact that her main tool, her fourth skill with the ult defense down, doesn't work, which is the same reason why Deadpool is not as good of a tier 3 against GBR Giant Boss Raid Master Mold as any of the other characters that he shares kind of the top 5 stance with. But the big one to take note of is Captain Marvel. She has catapulted herself into the top 5 for PvE content, and this is no joke, especially when kitted out with the new CTP of Rage. She is absolutely bonkers for all content. She maxes out, and that's the new max, by the way, that's 3.5 million. She maxes out 2 days of ABX. She can take on almost all 5 World Boss Ultimates. I think Proxima is probably the only one that she can't do significant damage to at a high stage. I'm talking 30, 40, 50 for some of these guys. 50 on Ebony is actually insane. And then she is quite good for GBR because she has the iframe ignore. Her damage just comes from her incredible amount of DPS on her 4th skill and the buffs on her 5th skill, so she doesn't rely on any sort of gimmicks that the giant boss would negate with their kind of debuff immunity. So she's very, very powerful, and you'll see her again on the list, I'm sure, if your eyes begin to wander. Let's actually zoom in just a little bit so we get a bit clearer view of things. Moving along, I didn't make too many changes to the top 10. I did shift some characters around a little bit. I dropped Cable's value a bit. I bumped Mr. Fantastic's value up. His value is going to continue to rise as he's pitted against Captain America Tier 3, and while I've seen reports that he is better in GBR pretty much automatically, and their value in World Boss Ultimate is kind of similar, it's really going to come down to ABX. I know some of you don't want to hear that, but it's possible that if Mr. Fantastic outpaces Captain America by a lot, now that the cap is 3.5 million, he is going to become a more valuable Tier 3 for the moment, compared to Captain America. Now, of course, Wolverine or another combat hero could come and swoop and take the trophy out of both of their hands, but for now, that is how it's shaking out. Gambit maintains, you know, an outside top 10 position. I have a soft spot for Gambit, but he's just an amazing world boss finisher. He can do GBR, but I don't want to list him there because it's very difficult, and then he just has no place in Alliance Battle Extreme, and I'm going Supernova. Thanks, Sunlight. I raised Dr. Doom quite a bit. Actually, you know what? He wasn't even on this list. So that was another reason for doing the snapshot. He wasn't even here. We all grossly underestimated, myself included, his value for different PvE game modes. He can do 50+ World Boss Ultimate. He can do GBR, and he can definitely do, and he competes for the #1 position in at least one day of ABX, which is the Universal Villain Day. But not far behind him, just to keep in mind, is Victorious. And Victorious is here because she can compete very heavily, very closely with Dr. Doom for his day, but she also dominates the day for the supervillain female. She is the #1 day for that if you don't have Minerva, and depending on your build, you may want to favor Victorious over Minerva, and so she definitely has to be there. And believe it or not, she actually is pretty good for GBR. Yeah, she actually does get some pretty decent damage in there. She's quite tanky, and so she does put up respectable numbers in a difficult game mode. I dropped Strife quite a bit because he just doesn't have as much staying power in the PvE game modes as he once did, and he's just not as heavily required for any one of the kind of game modes that he's favored for. Same thing goes for Thor. With the emergence of Captain Marvel Tier 3, he kind of just starts to lose value immediately, starts to deflate. And because of, you know, literally no buffs to the character, this situation is going to remain the same until he gets a uniform. Moving along, I put more emphasis on characters like Ghost Panther, and that's why I raised him up on the list, because with the fall of Thor Tier 3, it also actually improves Ghost Panther's value. Not only is he a great leadership for other characters on this list, like Human Torch, which I actually bumped his value up to, he's also a great support character for all characters in the game, and he can get pretty close to Thor's score for ABX. So he really just does everything Thor does, plus more. So why that wouldn't make him a good character with less investment is beyond me. And so that's what I see more people using Ghost Panther, more people referring to Ghost Panther, especially if they're going to build Captain Marvel for PvP, and then having that versatility. The rest of the list kind of shakes out with pretty similar characters that you're used to seeing. Emma Frost gets a bit of a bump, Black Panther, Winter Soldier. I did move some of the characters out of the list, like Ant-Man. Jean Grey is also gone off of the list. Doctor Strange as well. They were kind of hanging on, but with new additions like Captain Marvel, Minerva, they get bumped out, they get bumped down, and then they just get bumped out by new characters as well, like Nick Fury, who's quite a good character, has value for GBR with his 5th skill, giving all allies who stand in that circle a buff. And then, of course, Korath. Not a very strong character, don't get me wrong, but in terms of how he's being used in the game, pretty much every competitive alliance has to build him up for ABX because he is the best speed villain that we have. Anti-Venom stays and keeps his spot just due to his utility. I found a little bit more value for Weapon Hex as a striker in World Boss Ultimate, pointed out by a fan on Twitch on the live stream, so you may want to try her out. And then Morgan Le Fay kind of rounds out the list. Honestly, I was just kind of like, about Morgan Le Fay, but I wasn't really sure who should take her place here. I didn't want to just give a prestige vote to someone like Jean Grey, so I thought Morgan Le Fay was pretty fair, and she does have a pretty niche role as a universal female villain, which may still come in handy for Shadowland with the new changes. Moving on to PvP, I think PvP is where we've seen a much more radical shift in the meta, and I think this is probably one of the biggest shifts we've seen since like Deadpool 8 months ago, so I do have to give it up for Captain Marvel. You may disagree with this list, you may disagree with her being #1, but whether or not Net Marvel is doing it on purpose, last week and this week, she was literally on every timeline team that I fought. I know I'm in Vibranium, and Vibranium does not represent all of the leagues, but it does represent the top meta leagues, because this is where the most competitive players are. You've got players who want to win so bad. You got players here already approaching 100 wins after just a couple of days. So this is really where the biggest dogs and the biggest whales, you know, fight it out, duke it out for top spot. And if you go through this week, it's a bit more skewed. But if you go through if you went through even last week's teams, I had a hard time finding a team that didn't have a tier 3 Captain Marvel because she was so dominant. Now, for this week specifically, I said that Net Marvel may be doing it on purpose because the Vibranium restrictions are huge. They feature basically every meta character except Doctor Doom, Captain Marvel, and like Scarlet Witch, I guess. I mean, I guess Thanos, that's it. There's so many insane bans. I mean, Wasp and Jean Grey, by the way, and Strife. So you've just killed 3 of the best debuff leaderships in the game. You murder the Deadpool teams. Oh, also Angel for the free-to-play debuff types. Quicksilver gets banned. This is insane. This ban list is probably the best ban list I've ever seen in terms of trying to cripple the existing meta and forcing players to use characters that they haven't yet you know, heavily invested in for PvP. Of course, the notable exceptions are these 3 goons right here. If I were to make the list better, I probably would have also banned Thanos. I don't know how I feel about not banning characters when they've just come out, i.e. Doctor Doom last update, Captain Marvel this update. On the one hand, it does feel kind of shitty to ban characters who have just come out because then you can't even play with them. But then on the other hand, it feels shitty to not ban them and to ban everyone else and then completely screw over the players who have no chance in hell of countering this dynamic duo, or in this case, this dynamic trio. For those of you also kind of panicking, there are definitely other debuff leads that aren't kind of heavily investable. Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Malekith? Yeah, he has a debuff leadership. So do Sentinel, Odin, and Supergiant, just to name a few. Not all of them are easy to get or super cheap. Not as cheap as Angel, but Angel is unique. He's one of a kind, we should say. But given that we've seen such a massive shift in the PvP meta, and we've seen some on the rise in Alliance Tournament. I don't want to give the Alliance Tournament trophy yet to Captain Marvel here, but I've seen some positive results for now. So I'll continue to monitor that, and then if it needs to be changed down the road, I will change it. I do expect this to change again with the reintroduction of Wolverine and also Deadpool's uniform. It may very well make him #1, but the rest of this, the rest of this top 5 pretty much shapes and shakes out the way that you expected it to. I was a bit high on Thanos with the last snapshot. Putting him at #1 was really an emphasis on timeline battle over everything else, but honestly, with the introduction of Captain Marvel, she really hard counters Thanos. I know that the developers, and I know that some players have kind of passed this notion that Thanos is a good counter to Captain Marvel because he can take away her binary form with his first skill. Yeah, honestly, I'm not buying that at all. First of all, yeah, he can take away her binary form, but he'll be dead, usually, before he gets to his first skill. Secondly, Thanos predicates himself on long iframes that don't allow you to target him, like his 5th skill and his 4th skill. Guess what Captain Marvel can do when you iframe? She can hit you in iframe. So it's actually worse to have slow, long iframes like Thanos. Additionally, Thanos is not a nuke character with really heavy hitting attacks that aren't iframes, and that is really what counters Captain Marvel. The way to counter Captain Marvel is to have a character with a skill that doesn't have an iframe, so that she doesn't iframe ignore you when you do it, and then to just smack her once and put her down. kind of like Scarlet Witch's 4th skill, for example. That's a decent way to counter her. But I will say that I have seen the meta in Timeline Battle, at least in Vibranium, shift accordingly to Captain Marvel, and that is the bigger indicator, and that is my bigger justification for putting her at number 1. I've seen a resurgence of teams with Doctor Strange, and that is strange unless you consider the fact that he has iframe ignore on his 1st skill. And so the iframe ignore on Doctor Strange's 1st skill, coupled with the fact that if you don't bring debuff, he can freeze Captain Marvel, actually does give him a fighting chance. And if you stall out the 20 seconds of debuff from a leadership like Wasp or Doctor Doom, you can catch her anyways by using Doctor Strange's 1st skill in the 21st 22nd second of timeline, and then you can kill her in that kind of 5-second window. Same thing goes for Sentinel. I've seen more Sentinel because of the debuff leadership, because of the villain tag, and the fact that he doesn't have a weakness being a universal type against Captain Marvel. And also Winter Soldier. I've seen more Winter Soldiers because of the fact that he can, you know, use his iframe ignore to snipe her if he has the chance to get it off. I still see Novas, which is why he didn't move off the list, again specifically to try to counter Captain Marvel, but otherwise a lot of the meta has continued to be shaped around the arrival of Captain Marvel, especially in Timeline Battle. I really don't have any reason to keep characters like Spider-Man and Jean Grey at the top, so they've all kind of taken a tumble. Captain America took a tumble. Doctor Doom rose quite a bit, in part thanks to his leadership, but in part thanks to his tankiness and the fact that he can withstand quite a few Captain Marvel barrages. He does also suffer from the same design flaws as Thanos with the long iframes. It's very easy to let Doctor Doom go into his 5th skill, and then when he goes up with the meteor, you rush in with Captain Marvel, hit the 4th skill, you interrupt his attack, and you whittle him down to half-life or less. So that definitely does need some additional monitoring and tweaking. But other than someone like Quicksilver, other than, you know, high dodge characters or high damage characters that don't have iframes, it's very hard to counter Captain Marvel unless you use Captain Marvel. And that is the biggest sign of a super meta contender, that you have to use the character against itself in order to actually kill it. I raised Victorious's and Emma Frost's value as well for PvP. Victorious, on the one hand, she's just a good PvP character, period. Emma Frost, on the other hand, seems to be possibly a good counter to Captain Marvel. I've been killed a few times playing as Captain Marvel against an Emma Frost, and it kind of annoyed me, and I didn't really know why. So I do have to show respect, and if some of you can investigate that more and get back to me, I would really like that. The rest of the list kind of shakes out normally. I moved some of these characters off. I moved, I mean, I don't even see Dormammu anywhere anymore. It's very hard to stay on this list, period, if you don't have at least level 70. I mean, you can count on one hand the number of non-level 70 characters that are on this list. We've got Nova, Jean Grey, Colossus should be 70, that was a mistake. We've got Nova, Jean Grey, Blue Marvel, and Adam Warlock. There's 4 characters on this list, if you don't count my typos, that don't have either tier 3 or level 70. So I want you to take all of those things into consideration. I want you to let me know, what do you think of the tier list? What do you, or sorry, not the tier list. What do you think of the meta snapshot? Do you agree with my analysis of the meta? Do you think that more tweaks need to be made? Am I overvaluing certain game modes now? Is Timeline Battle too much on my mind? I don't know. You guys let me know down below in the comments. Let me know what you think of this list. Should I add anything to it? I always love tweaking these things and getting more kind of longevity out of them and more use out of them. So hit me up. Also, since I have you guys here and I'm here as well, I'm also looking to change the CTP guide. I don't like the way this looks. It's messy and ugly. So if you have any suggestions for me, if you want me to do it in the same style as I did the uniform guide, we can. If you have other ideas, let me know. I know I've asked you this before, but I want to ask you again. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.